Well, I think you've learned your lesson. Or have you? Hi, this is Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, Senator Susan Collins, a Republican, along with a couple of others, including Senators Rob Portman and Shelley Moore Capito, have all said in more or less that they were voting to acquit President Trump of the impeachment charges because they think he's learned his lesson. Although Capito said she thinks he's going to be a little more judicious and careful going forward. And then she said, well, he may not because he is who he is. Susan Collins said that she thinks that the president will be much more cautious in the future. Portman was a little more vague in his explanation of it. But it made me wonder, Bill, I know that these Republicans are just giving their reasons for voting for acquittal, when you would think that by everything they've said so far that they'd be the kind of people who would rather see him convicted and removed from office. But the question I had was, will he learn his lesson? In other words, does this whole process make President Donald Trump step back and say, you know what, maybe I need to be a little more careful. Maybe I need to couch how I say things. Maybe I need to make sure I'm accountable when I'm on a phone call with a foreign official. Will anything change about the president's behavior as a result of this rebuke that he's received from the House of Representatives?
He didn't receive a rebuke from the House of Representatives. They had a chance to rebuke him, and they decided not to take that option.
I'm just talking about the House, because the Senate hasn't, the Senate's going to vote to acquit.
So let's just be clear about this. The House had the opportunity to censure the president, and they declined. They decided to go with the impeachment option, which is what they took, and the president will be acquitted, in which case there is no censure applied. He's acquitted of all charges. He's found essentially found not guilty of everything. So as far as the slap on the president's wrist that was administered to him by Congress, let's be crystal clear about this. That was an option that was available to the leadership of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives, and they declined. So as far as that goes, he's walking out of here scot-free. Let's just get that straight. And the reason I think that needs to get straight is because the censoring option is something that they could have done, should have done, and when I say should have done, at the very least, that was the most appropriate response to the allegations against the president if they turned out to be true. So this business of now that he's been smacked by Congress, he hasn't been smacked by Congress. Congress had their chance to smack him, and they turned it down. And I think that needs to be—
the severity of the punishment so-called, even though there will be none here. It's just the idea, do you think it's been brought to his consciousness that maybe there are better ways to conduct yourself and that he will act differently in the future?
I don't know. Look, first of all, I hate to be splitting hairs with you here, but it's important in this particular case. When you say that there are better ways to behave, what I think Donald Trump may take from this is that the most effective way to behave as a corporate executive is perhaps not the way you should behave as the president of the United States. It doesn't mean it's not the most effective way, but it might mean that, yes, there are restrictions on your behavior as president of the United States that are different than the restrictions on your behavior of Trump International or whatever his company is. But again, when you get down to it, I do not see anything in the allegations against Donald Trump. It's not Scott, this is not a question of they did it, it's wrong, so it's okay for us to do it too. All I'm saying is this. We have a chief executive because the chief executive is a person who is empowered to speak for the United States of America. And I would like to know to what degree every single president of the United States has used pressure like that in performing the job of president. I'd like to know who didn't, is what I'd like to know. Now, with that said, I think that, yes, I think that he should certainly be aware of the fact that this is not the corporate world, that there are restrictions on him as president, and that I suspect he probably will, in fact, realize that is a particular case of it.
So it's not a betrayal of the faith to acknowledge that it wasn't exactly a perfect phone call.
This is the thing that I have a problem with. This is the thing that I have a problem with. A perfect phone call, I don't know what that means. Are you saying that he should have been clearer that this was a personal request and had nothing to do with anything else. I am speaking entirely for myself here. When the president of the United States is calling a foreign leader and asking him to cover something up or else, that's one thing. When he calls a foreign leader and says, I'd like you to uncover something or else, that's something else. And this is the fundamental issue that has decided my stance on this entire thing from the beginning. If this whole thing had been about Donald Trump applying pressure to get people off of an investigation, I'd feel very different than I would about Donald Trump trying to find out why people who were on an investigation were pulled off an investigation. So that's as far as I'm going to go in terms of defending that. Now, yes, as it turns out, when you look at the definition of abuse of power and so on, I don't think Donald Trump crossed that line, but I'm sure he was not aware of exactly where that line stood, especially coming out of a career of being in business rather than politics. That's why we elected him. We elected a businessman, not a politician. And I suspect that he did what he did with the Ukraine issue as a businessman. In other words, as a chief executive, performing in the way he's performed pretty much successfully for his entire life. So yes, I'd be willing to grant you that. But I'm not willing to say that, hey, this guy got away with this horrible crime or this abuse of power because of a Republican Congress, because I don't see it that way. I genuinely do not. I do not see it that way.
So this is coming to a close, or has come to a close for all intents and purposes. By the time this episode is seen by the public, the vote will have taken place. At this time, we're actually before the vote, and all roads lead to acquittal at this point. But Bill, when it's over, it's not necessarily over when it comes to the relationship between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Is there any hope at all for the president to be able to say at this point, okay, that's done. You gave it your best shot. You failed. We got to move forward in the best interest of the country? Or does he say to Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats, you tried to do that. That's the last time you'll ever get to do anything to me, because we are going to crush you in November, and everything between now and then and for the next 4 years is going to be obstruction of any efforts that you make to advance your ideas, because nobody messes with Donald Trump?
Come on, Scott. It's not because nobody messes with Donald Trump. It's because one of the parties of the United States of America has perverted one of the most important and foundational protections of the Constitution in order to throw mud at somebody so that they can cover up the weakness of their own candidates. They sent articles of impeachment that were 100% partisan, and they crawled them over there in the longest time possible in order to stretch this thing out. They made the Senate responsible for basically proving the House case that they couldn't prove in order to stretch this whole thing out. And they've just basically Donald Trump is in the position of saying, hey, could you hold my coat while I molest your child? No, I will not. I will not do that for you. No, we're not going to shake hands. Well, good try, Nancy. No, it is a political assassination. It has deeply, deeply damaged the constitutional power and responsibility that comes with impeachment, and has deeply, deeply damaged Americans' respect for the rule of law. And I think it's a completely immoral, completely disgusting, unpatriotic, un-American act by a bunch of people who are so consumed with power that they would rather destroy this country and rule over the ruins, and I wouldn't give them the time of day.
So you're saying don't reach across the aisle. Don't say, where can we find common ground? Where can we do things together? At this point, that's it. Your focus is completely on humiliating the Democrats and making sure that less of them get elected in November.
Precisely correct. Yes, precisely correct. If it were me, and I saw what I saw with the impeachment thing, and I saw what they did to Brett Kavanaugh, I would say this is now full-scale war with an enemy that will not suffer anything and will use any tactic, no matter how dirty, in order to get their power back. And therefore, I am now going to adopt the same rules of dealing with the Democrats that I would have dealt with the Japanese if I was a Marine in Guadalcanal. I have decided now. I didn't decide. I have seen the actions of my opponents perform so dishonorably and so far away from any sense of integrity or any sense of respect for the government of the United States that now I am hoisting the black flag here. Absolutely. 100%. You want to reach across the aisle to me after you've done this? You better keep your fingers away from the bar. Okay? Keep your fingers away from the bars. Do not put your fingers in there because they are going to get bitten off. That's what they deserve. That's the only way to deal with them. It's the only thing that they can understand. And most importantly, it is the only thing that is going to show the American people and this particular virulent strain of anti-American power-hungry lunatics that if an election is lost, you fight the election to come. You don't go back and refight the one you lost. And if these people are not old enough to handle democracy, then they don't deserve to be in the government. And it would be my job as president of the United States to do everything in my power to make sure that they never, ever, ever, ever are again. Ever.
So, upshot of it all, President Trump impeached but not convicted, gets to continue in office, unrebuked essentially, because probably will not change his behavior in any substantive way as a result. And from all indications at this point, and we're looking at this from early February of 2020, seems bound for re-election. I guess you got to wonder, how could such a politically savvy group of people led by people like Nancy Pelosi and Charles Schumer, who are political sharks, have been so wrong so often and have now set their party up for utter failure?
If I had Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in a room and I had to decide what level of problem these two people working together could solve, I think just figuring out how to open the handle on the door and get out of the room would be about as far as I'd be willing to trust them. And I'm not even sure they could do that. This idea that these people are political super geniuses who've done this incredible calculation and are playing four-dimensional chess is nuts.
She's Speaker of the House, Bill, in the middle of after a popular election that got Donald Trump in place, or at least an electoral college victory. So, she managed to sweep back into power during the Trump era and has engineered that. Are you just blowing that all off and saying this is an idiot who stumbled into this?
Let me take that bit by bit. First of all, as a student of American history and as a patriot underneath your disguise of being a complete, lunatic progressive, I would ask you simple questions like, for example, if a president wins, let's say a Republican president wins an election in a presidential election year, is it more likely or less likely that the House will flip to the other party after that election, just based on historical evidence?
I don't know what the numbers are, but I know it happens, and it happens with some frequency. But
it happens.
What's interesting here, Bill,
it is the most
what's
likely
interesting
case.
Here is that's not the question.
It is the question.
No, it isn't.
No, it is.
The question is, how is Nancy Pelosi still in charge of the House Democrats after that debacle? So the fact that she's held on to power indicates nothing as far as her savvy goes?
No, you are saying that Nancy Pelosi's incredible political acumen, the super genius that she is, allowed her to win an election victory after the election of Donald Trump in 2016, when Pelosi and the Democrats retook the House in 2018.
And she got reelected as House Speaker.
And I am saying, let's just take it one at a time. And I am saying that the House flipping after the election of a president, whether Republican or Democrat, is not only not unusual, it is the historical norm. So it's not like she pulled off some once-in-a-lifetime miracle. It's not like she pulled out 1 out of a 10 win or 1 out of 2 win or anything. She basically rode the tide of what is normal American history in terms of what the dynamics of American politics have been going back to the founding. So that's the first thing.
You're now, restating my question to make it much more sweeping than it actually was is not a highly effective debating tactic.
You're claiming that Nancy Pelosi is some kind of
idiot, Bill. She's clearly knows what she's doing politically.
Well, you're saying she's
help some House members win, and also to recapture the seat herself.
I'm trying to make the case that she is an idiot. You're claiming she's not an idiot because she managed to flip the House after Donald Trump was elected president. And I'm saying that flipping the House after the president is elected is not only an act of political genius, it is in fact commonplace. So that's the first aspect of it down. That's number one. Then the question becomes, how did Nancy Pelosi get reelected? Now we're starting to get to the actual benefits here. Nancy Pelosi was perceived to be a person of tremendous influence and achieved an awful lot, mostly because she was Speaker of the House during the 8 years of Barack Obama's presidency, when you had a president who didn't want to do anything. He didn't want his name on anything. He didn't want responsibility for anything. We called it Obamacare, but it wasn't Obamacare. It was Pelosi care. Everybody knew it. So they had a Democratic president and they had a Democratic House for a little while anyway. And Nancy Pelosi during those years managed to make the president look good. So put all of that aside, and let's just say that Nancy Pelosi is in fact one of the most effective leaders of the House of Representatives that ever existed in this country. That was then. If you have listened to the person speak, this is why you have a problem with the party, the party of the old people, the old kind of senile people, the Democrats. This is what happens when you have candidates of that age and who are not only of the age, but of that age and who have had the tailwind of the press coverage, of the fawning media coverage, of the pop culture, of all of the corruption, all of it, colleges, universities, all of it, pushing you downstream. You can afford to be, well, let's just come out and say it. I don't think Nancy Pelosi is in full command of her faculties. I don't think Joe Biden is either.
Well,
and I think that's
all of those
that's fairly clear.
That you outlined have been pushing the accelerator. In fact, if anything, Nancy Pelosi initially was pumping the brake, and so they all pushed her in that direction. And I guess the ultimate source of my question isn't really an evaluation of her sanity, but it is, how could a major party that has managed to capture the hearts and minds of about half the American public and more in some areas be able to screw this up so badly that they're probably going to lose the White House? They got nothing out of the impeachment process, and they just, if anything, they look worse than they did before. Is that just par for the course for Democrats?
No, it's par for the course for progressives. There was a time when the Democratic Party represented the people of this country, and as we are seeing large numbers of them, and we're seeing this in terms of Donald Trump's rallies, by the way, the numbers of people who are identifying themselves as Democrats there is really quite shocking. And the entire Democratic premise that the entire nation would rise up in response to the Orange Man tyranny and vote in record numbers in New Hampshire, that's one of the few pieces of data that these idiots were able to actually record. And that was that, no, there was not a huge turnout in New Hampshire.
In Iowa.
In Iowa. What is the matter with me? I made this mistake 5 times already.
In the neighboring state of Iowa.
It's just that, it's always, for most of my life, it's been the New Hampshire primaries have been first. In Iowa, the big anti-Trump wave didn't happen because of racism, by the way, if you remember watching your MSNBC. So what I'm saying is that the evidence that Nancy Pelosi is a great leader and a very smart person is predicated on how she basically worked with a tailwind with an immensely popular president who didn't want to do anything. In opposition to Donald Trump, she looks like she's provided an absolute catastrophe. And to the degree that she had a win of the House in 2018, my entire point here is that is not necessarily the mark of a master politician bucking historical trends. That's what you expect to have happen. So where is the evidence that she's such a great majority leader? Where is it? It's the same thing like Barack Obama. Oh, Barack Obama's the best thing that ever happened to the Democratic Party. The Democrats lost 1,000 seats nationwide in the 8 years of Barack Obama's presidency. So all of this is just cheerleading. It's just cheerleading, and I don't buy it. And I'm glad that they're cheerleading. And I hope to God that she stays the leader of the Democrats until November, at which point I don't think she'll be majority leader anymore. She might be minority leader, or she might retire, which is something she should have done certainly by the end of the Barack Obama presidency.
Well, we will be retiring of sorts, actually just relaxing and rejuvenating and refueling for 3 nights aboard the Navigator of the Seas, a Royal Caribbean ship that's going to cruise out of the port of Miami on May 15th and go toward the Bahamas, stopping for a day on a private island. And you can be there with us. You can actually hang out with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott and Stephen Green, who's a co-host of our Right Angle program. And more importantly, you can get to meet the kinds of people who are members and fans of this show, the kind of people that you will find an instant bond with, and you will enjoy a lot of laughter and relaxation. As Bill has pointed out previously, it's not that we're trying to isolate ourselves from the rest of society, but every once in a while, it would be nice to be able to speak your mind in public without having to walk on eggshells for fear of offending somebody or losing your job.
You're going to find out that you're the majority. You're going to find out that most people in the country think the way that you do. You're going to get a chance to get out into international waters and get away from this perpetual bell ringing on the part of these communists and losers. And you get a chance to come out and hang out with the winners and party.
Well, it's going to be a lot of fun, and if you haven't signed up for it yet, you can do so by going to BillWhittle.com and clicking on the big boat. If you're not a member at BillWhittle.com yet, you can ameliorate that by clicking that Become a Member link. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.